Chapter 7 of Man of Many Minds. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit librivox.org. Recording by Andrew Gauntz. Man of Many Minds by E. Everett Evans. Chapter 7. George Hanlon glanced about the observation deck and saw at some distance the young man who had sat at the same dining table. Hanlon grinned a bit and directed his mind that way. To the best of his memory, he concentrated on doing the same thing he had done when he got inside the steward's mind. For long, anxious minutes he tried. He felt tense, and the strain made his heart pound. At last he sank back into his chair. The other was just a fluke, I guess, he frowned in frustration and disgust at himself. I keep thinking I'm getting good, then flooey. He idly sent his mind toward the boy again, and suddenly found himself once more within another person's mind. It was a strange, weird feeling, this getting two sets of thoughts at the same time. Also, Hanlon felt a bit as though he was a trespasser in some forbidden temple. Yet he persevered, trying to see if he could read anything there, and was disappointed to find he could peruse and understand only the fleeting surface thoughts. With all his might, in every way he could think of, he tried to probe back and beneath those passing thought concepts, but could get no information whatever of the young man's past or knowledge. Only vacuous, self-centered thoughts which were flowing idly through the youth's mind were available to him. He wondered if he could influence the other to do something. If he could control another's mind, even just a little, it would really help him in his work. So he now tried every method his agile mind could imagine to make the fellow pick up the book that lay beside his chair. He concentrated on it, he insisted, he willed it, but in vain. He could make no impression whatsoever. Hanlon withdrew his mind. "I've no control," he thought to himself. "I can't take over his mind in any way. Neither can I read his past, just his present thoughts. That's not too bad, although I hoped I had hit the jackpot at last." After some further reflection, the thought occurred, maybe I can do better with someone else. During the balance of the day, he kept trying to read the minds of others of his fellow passengers, but found the same results in each case. He did, however, develop the technique of making a much quicker entrance into a mind, could do that reading more swiftly, and yet know he was correct. "I get it now. I've got to approach it relaxed, not all tensed up like I was at first," he finally realized. But when it came to probing into and reading the whole mind into its past thoughts and knowledges, no. Just that. No. Pessimistically, he began to feel he wasn't going to be able to do as much with his mind reading as he and his superiors had hoped. Did this mean, he wondered disconsolately as he went to his stateroom, that he was to be a failure in the Secret Service? Or, he brightened momently, could he develop other methods of ferreting out information? But that, he told himself honestly, was out. What did he know about detective work? The Secret Service already had the best detectives in the universe. This dark mood persisted while he went to bed and finally dropped off to sleep. But when he awoke the next morning, he felt cheerful again. He had a lot, and he would get more. He ate a good breakfast, then went back to his deck chair, and there, resolutely, he opened his mind once more to general impressions. He would keep working at it, and more was bound to come. Look how far he'd advanced already, a lot further than when he had started, and at that he probably, no, undoubtedly, could do more than any of the other fellows on certain problems. And as far as he knew, and Dad and Admiral Rogers had talked as though he were the only one they knew about, no one else could read even surface thoughts. So he kept diligently at it, and very soon, so strongly he deduced the mind must be very close to him, he again found those sinister impressions that had bothered him so much. This time he glanced about, in apparently casual curiosity, yet touched mind after mind of those nearest him, then hit pay dirt. Why, it was that bluff, hearty-looking, red-headed man in the third chair to his right. He didn't look vicious, that was certain, though there was a grim set to his jaw. Yet his surface thoughts showed the man to be hard, cold, and ruthless, a pure killer type. Hansen sensed he was one of those men who have such a will to power that the lives and rights of others are held cheaply, contemptuously, The kind who, if another gets in his way, removes him, but carefully, lest his own highly valuable skin be put in jeopardy. If he could get someone else to do the dirty work, so much the better. Such conscienceless killers were, Hanlon knew, usually errant cowards. There was someone on this ship who was in this man's way. Of that Hanlon felt sure. The killer was determined to destroy this other the first chance he got. His mind was now weighing chances and possible opportunities, and Hanlon read and learned. Yes, this must be one of those interesting people that unknown Secret Service tipster back on Terra had mentioned. Was the victim another? Probably, for Hanlon had not yet read any thoughts in this killer's mind about any Confederates. Hanlon kept close watch on this man and his mind, and picked up many other stray bits of information, including his name, Panic. None seemed of too much immediate importance regarding the matter at hand, yet they gave the Secret Service man a fairly good picture of the assassin's personality when pieced all together. Suddenly, and but a barely passing whisper of thought, Hanlon caught the concept that the intended victim's death was necessary to the coup they were planning on Simonides. Hanlon was instantly alerted by that planet name. Perhaps this was a definite lead for him. He strained to get more. The killer thought occasionally of a man he called the Boss, but not the name of that dignitary nor his actual position, politically, socially, economically, or otherwise. The Secret Service man fumed inwardly because he could not get a clear picture of that Boss. This murderer did not have a visual type of mind, darn it. He didn't see clearly in pictorial terms any of the people or scenes about which he thought. Hanlon had been gradually impressed, though, with the realization that this man was very much afraid of his boss. There was a mental shiver every time thought of his employer entered his mind. There was something about a previous failure, and what would undoubtedly happen unless it was done now, but Hanlon couldn't get enough of that to make any sense to him. Again Panic began thinking, though very sketchily, about Sime, as he called Simonides, and the plot that was being hatched there. Hanlon felt the man's sneering contempt for those beasts, but could gain no idea whatever about what that reference meant. In so many ways this puzzle seemed to be growing worse instead of better, and Hanlon knew a moment of frustration. But his sense of humor came to his rescue. "You want the whole thing written out for you in black and white?" he jeered at himself. "Snap out of it, quit being a defeatist." Harder and more intently he tried to probe into the man's mind. Oh, if he could only learn to read below those passing surface thoughts, to follow them down and back along the memory chains into the total mind. Revealing though the thoughts he could catch were, for complete and swift results he must find the technique of reading a mind completely, if such a thing were possible. But probe as he might, the way to those deeper buried memories and thoughts continued to remain locked from him. And then Panic got up and left the observation deck. A light touch on his knee some time later snapped George Hanlon's eyes wide open, and he looked down to see a small, wriggly dog looking up into his face, its tail frantically wig-wagging signals of proffered friendship, the little tongue making licking motions toward the hand the puppy could not quite reach. "Well, hi, fellow." Hanlon reached down and lifted the little dog onto his lap, where the latter wriggled and contorted in an ecstasy of joy, climbing all over the young man, licking at his hands and trying to reach his face. The puppy was so extremely happy and anxious to make friends that Hanlon was soon laughing, almost convulsively, while trying to avoid those well-meant but very moist kisses. "Wait now, boy, take it easy. I like you and all that, but let's not get carried away with ourselves." Hanlon scratched the puppy behind one of its floppy ears and pressed it firmly but gently down so it was lying on his lap. "That's better. Just lie there and take it easy." A sudden thought brought a grin onto the young man's lips. He tried to get into the puppy's mind, and got a real surprise, for after a few anxious moments of testing and trying he did it, actually got the dog's thoughts of pleasure at finding such a wonderful new friend with such a nose-appealing effluvium. Hanlon then tried to see if he could get into the deeper parts of the dog's mind, and using what knowledge of the technique he had deduced in his previous, though unsuccessful, attempts with humans, found after many more anxious minutes he could follow the thought and memory tracks back and back until the dog's whole mind was open to him. The puppy had far more of a mentality than Hanlon had ever guessed dogs had, and he knew they were far from stupid. This one's mind, he could now see, was immature but latently capable. Say, this was great! Hanlon probed some more and found many sketchy facts. Sketchy because the thoughts were incomplete to the puppy beyond its experience, and not because the man couldn't read perfectly what was there. The dog apparently knew a woman. Hanlon got the impression of skirts, and answered when that goddess called the word gypsy. "Gypsy, eh?" Hanlon said aloud, and immediately the dog wriggled from beneath his restraining hand, and again tried to climb up and lick Hanlon's face in a frenzy of adoration. "Lie down, sir, and be quiet," Hanlon said sternly, and the puppy did so instantly, without question or hesitation. Hanlon thrilled, realizing at once that it was not what he had said that did the trick, but the fact that he was still inside the dog's mind, and that it had obeyed his will rather than his words. Hey, this needs looking into. Without saying the words aloud this time, Hanlon commanded the dog, or rather he impressed the command directly onto the puppy's mind with his own, to get down off his lap onto the deck. Instantly it leaped down. "Lie down." The dog did so. "Roll over." Again, silently, but now the puppy merely looked up at him imploringly, quivering in apparent emotion of indecision. Hanlon realized the puppy didn't know how to roll over. "Guess I need to learn how to do it before I can teach, or rather command him to do it," Hanlon grinned wryly to himself, for he realized that to do so he would have to learn to control each of the dog's muscles, and that before he could do that he would have to know what part of the brain controlled the nerves that made those muscles obey his commands. And that, if possible at all, would take one galaxy of a lot of study and practice. For the next several minutes, then, he concentrated in making the puppy do a number of simple tricks, all the time watching carefully to see, if possible, the connecting links between brain, nerves, and muscles. He was beginning to make a little headway in understanding this triple correlation, when he heard a sudden gasp. He looked up to see a young matron standing before him, her mouth and eyes wide with surprise. Why, Gypsy never did any tricks before! What are you, an animal trainer?" Hanlon leaped to his feet. "The best in the universe, madam," he grinned. "That's a mighty fine puppy you have. He came over and introduced himself, and we've been having some fun together. Yes, he ran off, and I've been hunting all over for him. But how on earth did you ever teach him so quickly?" "It's a gift," Hanlon mocked, then grew serious. "Honestly, madam, I don't know," he said quietly. "I just seem to have a way with dogs, is all. By the way, would you sell me the puppy?" "Sell Gypsy? No thanks," and she started away, calling the dog to follow. But it stood in indecision, looking from one to the other, not seeming to know whether to follow its beloved mistress or to stay and play with this nice new friend. Hanlon quickly reached out to the dog's mind and impressed on it that it must follow the woman and always do whatever she told it. The puppy then trotted away, content. George Hanlon sank into his deck chair. This required a good think, a mighty serious think, he told himself. He would have to work on this as much as on human minds. For if he could control animals, would it work on birds or insects, maybe even fish? Then he could get into places he, as a man, could not go. The lady and dog had disappeared when Hanlon got the impression to see if his mind could find them, if he could again contact the dog when it was not in sight, and he did not know exactly where it was. Instantly, effortlessly it seemed, as though it happened merely because he wished it to, he found himself again inside the puppy's mind. Was it because he already knew that mind's pattern, he wondered? Anyway, there he was, and now he tried to see if he could look out through Gypsy's eyes. And after much study, he did so. But the vision was so distorted he wondered if his control was at fault, then remembered having heard or read somewhere that a dog's eyes do not work exactly the same as a man's. Finally, he accustomed himself to them enough so he could see that they were going down a narrow corridor, and then they stopped before a door, which opened after a moment. The dog, without a command, leaped through the doorway into the stateroom and ran to its basket, where it lay, panting, looking up at its mistress. End of Chapter 7.